Okay, hello everyone. Welcome to the Listening to Smile podcast. I am here today with Deb Macintyre from Perth, Australia. Fantastic, amazing woman. I'm going to jump in just a little bit here to say Deb and I have known each other since 2016, 17, maybe. I don't know. It's been a while. Um, and Deb has the heart of a warrior, but also the compassion and the wisdom of a guru. She's talented in multi aspects of her life and is just a lighthouse, bringing people through certifications and trainings and also her music and just her spirit to a different vibration that is in joy and in harmony with just gratitude. And so she always lights up our calls when she comes on our affiliate calls, and everyone that's new is like, who is that woman? I got to know her. And so we're bringing her to the Listening to Smile record label. And she has a new single out called Echoes of Abundance. We're going to jump into a lot of different topics today, but first, let's welcome Deb. I just want to say thank you so much for coming and being here today.
Thank you, Ian. I am so grateful and humbled to be on this podcast, and welcome to your listeners. I'm very excited to be chatting with you today.
Yeah. Well, let's jump in. So you have a single, you're the first artist on Listening to Smile Records, and you also have a single that is out now called Echoes of Abundance. And the first song on there is a collaboration between my music and your vocals. And I wondered if you would explain a little bit about the process of working together, and then also just the recording process, the vocals, and how that all came about, and just let people know what that experience was for you.
Mm. So for me, you'll hear me talk about a lot about being guided by spirit and my ancestors. So before I start any project, and as part of my practice that I do each day is my connection to the flow and asking them, which is the direction, how best can I serve those that I'm called to serve. So as part of this is I did a ceremony before and a ritual connecting to my ancestors and my spirit guides and just asking them the direction of how I should record it. So I speak and sing as well as in ancestral tongue. So a lot of it is ancient tongue that is no longer around as such. So again, being guided by my ancestors and spirit guides, that was what I was led to do. So playing the track and the track that resonated for that particular language to come through. And then I was guided to layer them. And also after chatting to you about it, chatting to Ian about it, was that he said, be free. Don't have any constraints. Be yourself. And this is something that from time to time, I just need a little bit of reminding to be me in this space, especially when it's a new space for me. So I've
Yeah.
always done my music and always taught and everything. But when you're in somebody else's space, I'm very mindful and respectful of that space. So when Ian said, okay, go for it, I was like, okay, let's do it. So it was completely free flowing, and I was guided to do these different voices, and those different voices and sounds that are coming through are actually being channeled from my ancestors. So as I open my mouth, that language and that voice and those vocals come through. So I was really excited because it wasn't a prolonged process. It was like, this is what we're doing and this is what we're doing now. And so I was able to layer the tracks one after the other. And then when we put it together, it was what it was meant to be. And I was
Mm.
really grateful for the result of it because for me, it was that gift to be able to share that.
Yeah. It's a very powerful track. And I remember on both of these tracks, I had this music together and, was used to it as an instrumental. And I remember telling you after you recorded the multi-layer vocals on there and put it together and we mixed it and I listened to it. It's like I couldn't imagine that song not having those vocals at that point. It was just a very powerful experience recording that with you. And I think it's neat because it has a very shamanic drumming kind of tribally feel, and with your vocals added to it, it just added a whole nother dimension to that track. So that track that we're talking about is called Echo of Abundance, and it's the single, the first track on her single Echoes of Abundance, the self-titled. And it's a really powerful, even the cover, I love the light, how it's shining behind you, and it's got the trees and the woods, and even the color in your braids you had in that picture. And you can check out this picture, everyone, at listeningtosmile.com, and you can also go to ltsrecords.org, and you can see, you'll find Deb Macintyre, and you'll find her album on there where you can purchase and support her. So yeah, so let's go to track 2, the Soul Retrieval Shamanic Journey Meditation. Um, this one is really special to me. It's the moon frequency, track, the meditation track, 210.42 hertz. But again, the vocals that you layered are just like, there's a guided meditation portion that is just really powerful, but then went back and added these additional vocals, I think 2 or 3 different layers of vocals, and they're just super powerful with the meditation. So do you want to explain a little bit about what this guided meditation is focused on, and kind of what is a soul retrieval for those who don't know, and
Yes.
just kind of lay that out? Yeah.
So, as a shaman, as an ancestral shaman, my grandmother was a Nepalese shaman from royal lineage, and her name is Padmawati. And so, it's part of her teachings and part of her guidance and how she handed those practices she handed down to me. We believe that when we have been disconnected from self, or we feel incomplete, we have suffered soul loss due to past trauma or experiences, whether in this life or past lives. So the soul retrieval is an opportunity for us in this deep meditative state to journey to those realms and dimensions. We say outer worldly realms and dimensions, to retrieve those missing parts through this deep form of meditation known as a shamanic journey. And the practice is soul retrieval, to retrieve those missing soul parts, those fragments that may have become disconnected and have gone to another realm, another dimension, to keep those memories and experiences safe, retrieving them and bringing them back so they can heal and become part of the whole. So being guided again by my spirit guides and my ancestors to put that specific soul retrieval, on that single or on side B. And again, that practice was written specifically for that single. So basically, again, I sat with spirit and just channeled the practice as it was, and then I was directed to, this is how we will do it. So again, that's what it was, and it was very powerful. And I wanted to add that every time I have played those 2 tracks in one of my events with one of my one-on-one clients, people have been profoundly moved and allowed themselves to go deeper within self, and also within that deeper connection, together with the music and the frequencies. It's just taken them to another level. And so I'm very grateful and humbled to be able to add the voice of my spirits and what comes from my mouth, and also being guided in these practices and adding it into the music of Listening to Smiling with Ian. So, Ian, I'm just, as you know, I always say to you, I am so grateful and humbled. And we have been working together since 2015. And it's just hasn't seemed that long. So anyway, I
Yeah.
just wanted to share a little bit about that's what that practice was, and I'm just so grateful to be able to share that.
Yeah. Well, I think you're one of the coolest people that I know, just from your personality and the way that you navigate, between kind of the rough, raw and the compassionate guru. And it's just kind of this seamless dance with you. And you just have such a cool appearance and cool personality. And everyone that I know that meets you just loves you. So I think it's a very humbling and cool experience to be a part of, working with you in this way on deeper levels. We have more music that we're working on in the near future. This is just the tip of the iceberg. And I'm super excited. So let's talk a little bit about your childhood growing up and kind of mixing two different cultures and styles of life and living. Um, at what age, so you were born in India, right? And at what age did you make the transition to Australia?
I came to Australia from Kolkata when I was 6 years of age.
Okay, okay. And then can you tell me a little bit about how those two cultures have played into your work that you're doing now? Like some of the education, some of the cultural aspects that you're blending and melding into this new um, presentation or offering of work, with your shamanic work, with your meditations, with all of the other offerings that you have. Can you explain a little bit about how those cultures meld together for you?
Yes, absolutely. So for me, firstly, it was quite a shock as a 6-year-old coming from India to Perth, Western Australia. And our side of Australia, firstly, very conservative. So it wasn't at that point in time, it was about 1970, wasn't as cosmopolitan, multicultural, and free flowing as it is now. So it took me a while to adjust and find my place. And as a young child, wanting to fit in a new culture, a lot of who I was or who I was raised to be with my grandparents or my grandmother and specifically was pushed to one side because I was trying to navigate this new way of being and trying to navigate how I could bring that into, where I was placed now in Australia. So it took me many years to find my way. And, there were a lot of lessons, a lot of toing and froing and understanding. And a big part of this journey was the acceptance of self, accepting for who I was as an Indian, accepting of who I was from Nepalese Tibetan lineage on my grandmother's side and shamanic teachings, and accepting who I was as a woman in Indian culture, and accepting of who I was as now an Australian placed in this very Western situation. So
Yeah,
for me, growing up was finding balance and harmony. And it took me many, many, many years and ups and downs to discover who I was. So for quite a period of time, a lot of my identity was pushed to one side as I tried to fit in, which we all tend to do from time to time.
yeah,
So for me, it's always been this appreciation. And I always say, when we talk about spirit guides, the crow is one of my totem spirit animals. And I have these vivid memories of when I was a baby in India and the crow was always with me. And that has always resonated with me. So there were aspects of my shamanic upbringing or my Indian indigenous upbringing that I never lost sight of. It was actually at the basis or the foundation of who I was. Because one thing I remember, no matter what I went through, was that I always had my spirit guides and my ancestors with me, and that I would always be okay as I navigated what this new way of being was. So coming together, I've always had an appreciation of different kinds of music, rhythm, sound, like I hear the rhythms, the sounds, the frequencies, the vibrations in water. I hear it in the air, in the breeze, in the insects, in whatever it has around me. I always feel that my journey has always been very grounded, and I would, again, gratefully and very humbly say that is part of my upbringing with my grandmother, being really connected to nature, because I know in times of pain and when I couldn't find myself, I could just stay grounded and take myself into nature and find that connection. So music and sound has been very important to me, as well as being drawn to certain kinds of music. And I would feel that is one of the reasons I'm very drawn to tribal music, not only with my upbringing, but rhythms like hip hop and some other real world music where there's that, not only that drum beat, but that connection to the culture in the music, the rhythm and the sounds that are so different. I've always been drawn to that. So as part of my journey and stepping more and more into music, I haven't told you this, Ian, but I actually come from a lineage of jazz singers. We
yeah.
have this beautiful recording from 1940s from my auntie and her brothers who had a jazz band in London. They used to go on the cruise ships. So I have always been, but never, what would you say? Never been trained to do it, just a natural gift. So I've brought that voice and that connection to my spirit guides and my ancestors into the music I do. And part of that, again, finding my way was I ended up studying at WAPA, which is the West Australian Academy of Performing Arts, is jazz, just to hone more of my skills, my foundation and my theory background, which then led me to perform as a jazz and blues singer for my own band. And then the appreciation of the different rhythms. I was drawn to Latin music because of its rhythms and its sound. I'm drawn to Bollywood because I'm from India. I'm drawn to those tribal music. You know, my father has African ancestry, so I'm drawn to African music. And all of this culminates is just, for me, an understanding of these are just vibrations and frequencies that emanate throughout this planet, right? Around us, surround us, underneath us, above us. And people have just taken, or humanity has taken these different sounds and vibrations and been guided to create these amazing pieces of music. So I am drawn to all different aspects. So bringing this together has now brought me to my center, into my focus, knowing who I am, bringing all those attributes together and saying, yeah, this is how I show up. This is the voice that I have. These are the vibrations, the rhythms, and the sounds that I feel within my body that emanate outwardly and connect with others that are around me. So being drawn to your music, which is very natural. So because you use like the moon frequency, the sun frequency, the different vibrations that you have, that's just a small part of what you do. But being drawn to those aspects and the underlying components in the tracks that you produce. I don't think I've ever told you that. So it might not be the track as you hear it, but I can hear the layers. And that's what I'm drawn to.
Yeah. Yeah. That's awesome. I remember when we first met and I knew that you did the vocals for like blues and jazz music. I was just like really blown away because typically those type of musicians are not making shamanic drumming albums and tribal sounding music. And it makes sense now when you're explaining your background. You have African music influence in India and Australia, and there's just a lot of cultural diversity. There's a lot of rhythmic differences and influences from those different cultures. And it's just really cool because each one of those cultures has very unique sounding instruments, like the didgeridoo in Australia and the tabla drums from India have a very unique, different sound than most hand drums. And then when you get into African music, like, obviously the djembe is a huge, instrument there, but also the kora, one of the African harp is such a unique sound. And like when you start mixing all of these styles and influence and rhythms, you really come up with a melting pot of some cool, new sounding inspired music. And so that's just really cool to know that. What for you, what was the defining point, like your cultural awareness, where, because there's a lot of differences in religious beliefs from these different cultures. What for you, like when you like coming of age, like where did you really know and have that first spiritual awakening? What was that for you?
Yes, I would say, again, my earliest memory is a baby in the cradle, just that connection to my grandmother and her voice, the sounds that she would play, just very, very grounded. And, I guess the word we use is tribal, but I would think more rhythmic and feeling that vibration within your body. So that has always been an underlying aspect of myself. So my spiritual awakening or my soul awakening sort of happened later in life. And that was because a lot of my journey was trying to fit in to where I was and push away all that other beautiful part of who I am. And it wasn't until, you will laugh when I tell you this, and I probably shared this with Ian, but for our listeners, so this is my natural hair other than I have beautiful Australian wool, which has been weaved into it. But other than connecting to how I feel and how I show myself, I used to manage a legal firm here in Australia, so I have a legal background. And I was very, honestly, I found it really difficult because I was like a goldfish. Literally, my office was made of glass, and I felt like a goldfish in a bowl, very confined and restricted. So there were things about the way I should dress, the way I should speak, the way my hair was. This was the days when women used to have to behave and be shown a certain way. And like I said, where I grew up in Australia was very conservative. So it wasn't until I limited myself. There is only so much the body and the mind can take. And when you have shut off that aspect of spirituality, whatever that is for you, and your own growth and transformation and evolution, there is a time when the body can't do it anymore. So I then had my breakdown, which I'm so grateful for, because it was when I had that breakdown, I was able to shed all those layers that didn't resonate with me, that I tried to conform with, that weren't me. And that was the moment that I stepped into my truth. So the journey then was being grateful for all these aspects of self, especially of my culture and who I was. Yes, I was part of this Australian culture, but in my deep roots was part of my African ancestry, my Indian ancestry, my Nepalese, Tibetan ancestry, and what it meant for me. So it then took me a journey, which I loved, down a beautiful rabbit hole, which I just absolutely adored, into who were my ancestors, where were they from, and this DNA is part of me. How can I honor that? So that was my spiritual and soul awakening and connecting all the dots. And again, I talk about my spirit guides and my ancestors. When I surrendered to them and said, guide me, bring those people into my life that can show me and nurture me in this space and support me, that's when it happened. So
Yeah.
this journey was me learning more about what my past was and my ancestors, because it is very important for us to know where we came from. And
Yeah.
then from that, understanding what their teachings were. So we call it, even though we say shamanism or whatever you want to call it, it's spirituality. So for me, spirituality has no boundaries. There's no limitations. There's no fundamentalist teachings. There's no traditional teachings. It is a beautiful space of infinite possibilities, whatever it is, and how we interpret it according to our own relationship with self, our own relationship with our ancestors and our spirit guides. I hope I
Yeah.
answered your question for
Yeah.
you.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's interesting. Fallon and I were talking the other day about the term self-made, right? And none of us are truly self-made. Like somewhere there was a door open because of somebody we knew, or our ancestors in the making. Like without them, we wouldn't be here. And a lot of the things that are passed down, whether that's experience or trauma or just an energy, right, that we're utilizing in this lifetime. There's so much that we're building upon. And it, like you said, it's so crucial to know those foundations, know where you come from, know who you hail from, where, like I remember finding out about my mom's mom because she passed away before I was born. Um, and she was a chemist in a time when that was unheard of for women to be a chemist. And my mom was explaining to me all the trials and tribulations that she had to go through in that line of work. So this leads to another question. You brought up the feelings of a woman in the workplace and the types of constriction and suppression that women feel. Am a very strong advocate for the divine feminine being the savior to the planet, right? So, you can look at Fallon and how Fallon has just radically changed my life. It's a piece that I've never known before. But then you also look at, when you're looking at diplomacy and you're looking at conflict resolution, and you're looking at other things like creativity, innovation, these types of, words, these vocabulary words, you're really looking at a more feminine energy that is, because in my opinion, women are the community builders. They are the nurturers and the networkers that can do that activity in a way that masculine energy was not meant to. You know what I mean? It's just not the same type of energy. And so with all that being said, you know, my viewpoints and opinions, but with all that being said, what is your thoughts and feelings on the next wave of, you know, awakening? And then do you see the artists, musicians, poets, dancers, the creatives, do you feel that they have an active part in this next awakening, you know, for the planet? Because you see the same types of things that women have dealt with. You're starting to see artists, musicians, poets. I mean, there's just a rape and pillage that is happening of creatives across the globe, told they're not worth it and pushed down, you don't need this, you don't. And when you look at an artist, you know, I know this is a long drawn out question, but when you look at an artist, you see how much it costs to just buy a canvas and buy paints. And then you see how much it costs to just actively promote yourself. A musician the same way, a poet the same way. And then nobody is willing to accept these art forms on the level. It's a constant, like, you know, you know, the price is $150. Would you take 20 for it? You know, it's this belittling of the whole thing. But I guess what I'm looking for in this question is, do you see the power of the divine feminine to awaken the planet? And can you see the role that the creatives are going to be playing in this energy of pushing that tidal wave out?
Yes. In a one short, very word, the word
Yeah,
that dropped in for me was it is a revolution.
yeah,
And then I got taken back to the 60s. So I believe and agree. The divine feminine is very, very important in the healing of this planet and has been for eons of years. I do believe that there is a very deep soul and spiritual awakening in people, as well as in the planet itself to heal. And that's because of the energy that is emanating from those people that are stepping forward and accepting their calling. So we all
yeah,
have this calling, but there are few who will step into it. So whether you call them enlightened beings, light workers, whatever word you want to put around that, I do believe people are stepping into their own, whether they're poets, painters, artists of any form, whatever it is that they're stepping into. And I also can see, I hate using the word conglomerate, but that was the word that dropped in, a group of people who are standing up not only for their beliefs, but the value of the investment they have placed on this belief. So I know that the work that I'm providing or the service that I am giving is of this high value, which is connected to how we feel about ourselves. I know that I am part of this divine lineage. I know I'm connected to the divine feminine, whether you're masculine or feminine, right? Um, and as I step into this power that is emanating from within me, which I know I am just the conduit to be providing this gift to you humbly and with gratitude from my spirit guides and my ancestors, as we stand together and say, this is what we are providing to you to allow you to go on your own journey, to allow you to heal yourself, to allow you to create that space to connect to your spirit guides and ancestors, to connect to that deeper part of self so you can heal from any past trauma or experiences. As we do that, because people are being called to, the people who feel they don't even have anything inside of themselves to give will be drawn to that energy and awaken within themselves the gift that they do have. So I hope I'm answering your question here because I can see it all very visually that us holding our hands together, forming that barricade. I love that revolution. Yay. And stepping forward and saying, it is up to each one of us individually, no longer that group of people or that group of people, but it's up to each one of us individually to do the work,
yeah,
to bring what we have to the masses. And yes, we are all joining together. And what I love with the Listening to Smile records, and we're listening, probably they're listening to Smile records now because you're stepping into this space on this scale that I can see is just so huge. And I know it's at the beginning stages, but bringing people together to say it's a tribe. and stepping into that space and showing people the possibilities that they have for their own life.
Yeah. Yeah. It's funny as you're talking and saying this, I see, it's like you have such a deep wisdom on like the shamanic side of teachings and certifications that I, wouldn't have a clue on the level of where you're at. And then in the music space, I've been doing this for most of my life. I tell people jokingly, but in truth, that I've pretty much done every job that you can do in the performing like performing arts sector. I've worked at museums, I've worked at, municipalities with, after live after five programs. I've done art festivals, poetry, dance recitals, student recitals. I've traveled as a musician touring. I've done a magazine. I've done, now we've started a record label. I've started the holistic business and done, the business that's in 12, 13 different countries. So it's like, every aspect from like a small town to a mid-level, museum and everything in between, few, a lot of different things. But my point is that that experience, it's like me inviting you into that moment to say, hey, just do whatever your heart desires. Like that joy of like just being a kid and everything's is available to you, any possibility, any, opportunity, you just it's yours, you just make it happen. And I think like watching you dive into that where you just had that freedom, it's like I didn't do anything but just help you remember that you're your own God in that universe of creation. And you just like, oh yeah, I don't have any chains on, I'm just do whatever I want. And this beautiful piece of music came from that. And I think like what's cool about art and film and, just creativity in general is it's the inspiration is actively inviting other people to do that same act, like, well, that person did that amazing miracle, I can do that too. And just I think it's just such the big, underlying thread is inspiration. It's like art, music, poetry, dance, all of these things are inspiring and they're inviting you to do the same, to put your spark out into the world. And I think that's just such a cool thing to be a part of. So yeah, so I have, a couple more questions. One question that I would love for you to answer is, do you have any musical influences that really stand out to you in a strong way? If not, that's okay. But I just wondered if there was, I just felt like it was going to be a lot of diverse uh taste. But yeah, I would love to hear some of your influences musically.
Yeah, baby, give me Miles Davis, John Coltrane anytime.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, I have studied music, and again, part of this journey into music led me then into my ancestry. So even though I'm not from the American South, in the era of when the blues originated, from the cotton fields and all that, man, I resonate with that music. My ancestors, my father's ancestors, were taken from Africa to work cane fields in Mauritius, and that music takes me back to a memory, perhaps it's in my DNA, that I can feel what it was like, what it might have been like for them. But again, I keep getting this word, this grounding, this earth, how we are all connected to Mother Earth. And when I listen to those musicians, especially when it comes to blues and jazz, it really takes me with what those sounds I hear and the emotions that are put in that music. It really takes me back to who I am at my core. So yes, Miles Davis and Coltrane,
Okay.
definitely. There's a multitude of artists that I listen to, that I'm exposed to. I love African centric tribal music. I love music that originates from the Caribbean. Um, Very, very earthy, I guess, grounding music. That's the word I keep using. And I also have my fun times. I remember, some poppy songs that pop into my mind that just bring that inner child out in me and that joy. So, who doesn't bop to Christina in the Waves, Walking on Sunshine in
Yeah.
moments of desolation or sadness? I need to pick me up. So I am now spending more time in the general music field because I found with the work I was doing, I was starting to isolate myself a little bit into what I was in, which is nothing, there's nothing wrong with that, which is that moment of just growth and now expanding and listening to more to what is out there and one's music or tunes that I am actually drawn to. So I couldn't name anyone because it's normally tracks, not the individual that I'm drawn to. However, I do like a bit of Rihanna
Yeah.
and some
Yeah.
of her music and poetry. I'm all down. Eminem, number one, and of course some hip hop.
That's
um,
cool. Yeah.
when I'm doing my admin work in my office, put on some Big or something like that, and
Yeah.
I'm really digging that. So I do listen to all different kinds of music, but there's definitely music that I definitely am called to at certain times in my life.
Yeah. Yeah. It's funny because I make frequency music. A lot of people ask me if I even listen to things that are not frequency music. And it's always funny because I love older, comparative to the kids today. But I like, I still remember Kind of Blue by Miles Davis. I listened to,
Mm,
my sister had passed away in a car wreck when she was 21. And I remember being at the hospital because my mom and sister were both in the same car wreck, and my sister passed away and she was 21. And my mom made it, but she broke, I think it was like 12 bones in her body, and it took her a long time to repair. So I was at the hospital with my mom for a while, and sometimes family members would come by and sit with my mom so that people could have a break and rotate. And there was a record store across the street from the hospital. And I'll never forget this because it was called Papa Jazz. And so I went into the store, and I guess the guy just picked up on my vibe, and he was like, "Brother, you need to listen to this album." And it was Kind of Blue by Miles Davis. And I remember the first time I heard, because I told him, I was like, I'm not really into jazz very much. This was probably 2005. And I went home and I listened, I bought the album from him, and he gave me a couple other Charlie Parker, um,
mm.
Coltrane, Thelonious Monk. So I think I bought like 9 albums that day. And it was just all the jazz greats, because I was just diving into something new. And as soon as I put on Kind of Blue, it just blew me away. And it's still to this day, as soon as you hear that da 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 bum bum, you're just like, all right, I'm in. Where are we going? Where are you taking us? And so yeah, so for me, music has such a transportive teleportation effect. You hear something when you're in high school, or you hear something when you're in a romantic relationship, or you hear something in a very inspirational time, it locks in that time capsule. And I think that, I'll never stop visiting all those time capsules that I've collected through the years, but I definitely spend a majority of my time in the frequency realm because I know it's good for my soul and my body, and the rejuvenation that has taken place, from that is just undeniable. So that's why I spend a majority of my time in the frequency, but I still visit those other treats, and so yeah, I think it's a cool thing. And those are some good influences, that you have, and also just styles, a lot of different styles there. So yeah. Um, so basically, how can people find you? What is a way for them to connect with you outside of the album? Like, can you give them your website? And are you taking active, are you active with taking clients? And do you have any certifications or retreats that are coming up?
Thank you, Ian. Yes, so my website is my name. So debmacintyre.com. So you can jump on that check out all my latest offerings. Yes, I do work one-on-one with people from all over the world, and I'm so grateful and humbled for that. And depending on what it is that they need at that time. I also have the Shaman's Academy for those people interested in awakening the shaman within themselves, learning about these ancient practices and how they can transport them or integrate them into their everyday. You know, the foundation of shamanic practices and teachings is pattern disrupting. Just because we believe that in order for us to heal or to step into our truth, we first need to let go of those limiting beliefs and those attachments that we are holding on to, ones that don't serve us. So it's the healing from that trauma and disrupting that. So I do run the Shaman's Academy, and at the moment that's 5 levels with growth for more senior practices, you know, connecting more into certain things like, you know, in India, we call it Ayurveda, shamanism, it's plant medicine. So, you know, deepening the aspect of that. So yes, there is a certification program that I do for that, and that will soon be online because we have spoken about that. So
Yep.
I'm really excited about that. But at the moment, I'm doing a lot of people want to do that one-on-one with me. So they have that one-on-one time with me for that teaching. So I do that. The other thing is, and I do feel this might be my last year going to India. So every year I run a shamanic spiritual immersion retreat in the foothills of the Himalayas in
Wow.
Rishikesh. And the reason I started this, 10, 15 years ago, was because I was called to go back to India. I have been before, but called back to go to this specific place to spend 9 weeks in an ashram. And I was like, okay, Spirit, don't know why I'm going, but I'm going. And my family were very a woman on her own going to India. And I was like, no, it's fine. Spirit has called me. I know it'll be fine. So that awakening, again, another layer or level of that deep soul spiritual awakening triggered me in all sorts of bringing all my ancestors and just that deeper reflection within self. While I stayed in that ashram, and if you've ever sat in an ashram, it's the most humbling, beautiful experience. Yeah, anyway. So from that, then I was like, wow, this enlightenment and I feel this awakening, I want other people to feel that. So then I started taking people into this space. So I've been doing that for about 10 to 15 years, and we have our next one in November this year. So that's very, very exciting. It's a beautiful 12-day journey with myself and a couple of other shamans who have gone through the academy and have graduated. And it's beautiful because one of them is from Chilean and Peruvian ancestry. So sometimes people come from all walks of life, and some of them are wanting to connect to their ancestors. You know, perhaps they've lost that connection and they just want to reconnect, want to awaken their own shaman within. So it's taking these practices and allowing your own energy, your own ancestry, your own journey to become part of that. So I'm really looking forward. So one of the beautiful practices we do in this spiritual place is everyone's heard of the Ganges and how polluted that part of the river is. However, this part of Rishikesh, we call her Mother Ganga. She comes straight down from the Himalayas, and by law, she's not allowed to be polluted. You may go into her for ceremony. You cannot bathe in her, you cannot take from her, or you cannot throw anything in her. So by law, she is treated like this honorary, superior, supreme being. So I go in there and we do a water rebirthing ceremony. And it is just the most miraculous experience you can have. So yes, so my next retreat is to the foothills of the Himalayas in Rishikesh, and that's my shamanic spiritual immersion retreat.
So that's November, what's the date?
4th to the 15th.
4th to the 15th. So that's a long time you guys are spending together. That's really cool. Yeah, it's awesome.
Yes,
Okay, and then that information is on your website they can find there. Okay.
correct.
So debmacintyre.com. And then to wrap this up, I just want to say, one, thank you for being a part of the label, being a part of listening to Smile in general. And then, you know, for being a part of this podcast. But if you are going to invite someone in, you know, that hasn't done, you know, has never listened to your music, what would your invitation be for the single Echoes of Abundance? How would you tell them, invite them into this process with you?
Yes, I would just find yourself a quiet space because our lives are so busy and chaotic, and we have these stresses that. So I feel that this music and this single will really help you find that deep connection to self and some calmness and peace. So putting it in headphones and just having a quiet moment, maybe grab yourself a cup of tea or whatever it is, and just listening to what it awakens within yourself. Not allowing the mind to get too preoccupied with what you're hearing, but I want you to feel it, feeling that
Yeah.
vibration, feeling the sounds and what it means for you. Because I know that everyone who listens to this track is a different awakening within themselves because we're individuals, right? Depends what's going on in
Yeah.
our life and what we're holding on to. There is a different awakening. So, some people weep, some people it brings joy because it brings a memory, a beautiful memory from when they were younger. Some people connect all of a sudden to their spirit guides and their animal totem guides. Some people have their ancestors dropping in. Some people just have that clarity and that direction that go, okay, this is what I'm doing. So whatever it is for you, it's just connecting in with no expectations. As humans, we always have expectations. No expectations. Plug in, cup of tea or whatever you drink, and just feeling the frequency, the vibrations move through you and allow it to awaken or heal whatever it needs for you.
Yeah. And there's something I'll add to that. I think that in today's society, especially with streaming, a lot of people will find a track and then just kind of not really revisit it. They'll listen to it and then move on to something else. And I think that it's a product of there being so much choice, so many varieties. And I think each day, 40,000 new songs are uploaded to Spotify. So that gives you an idea of how much music there is and how much content there is for people to process. But what I want to suggest to the listeners is that you find people like Deb very rarely in this world, I mean, and I'm not speaking into limitation. I'm just saying, like, Deb is a very unique person, and this is someone who deserves the opportunity for you to listen to this as a mantra, to really kind of, maybe the fifth listen, you hear something completely different than the lyrics than you did the first listen. Maybe the music affects you by the 10th listen in a different way than it did on the first listen. And the more consistency that we give the vibration and frequency, the more opportunity we're allowing for it to have an experience with us of moving stagnant energy. But the deeper that we come to an understanding of a piece of music, like I said, Kind of Blue, for me, that album I probably listened to 100 times at least, and each time I listen to it, it's a new experience. And so I'm just inviting people to really um, step outside of the hustle bustle and to really get to know this recording as a time capsule of mine and Deb's collaboration, influences, ancestors, collection of experiences. And it's a really powerful experience. I'm really proud to be a part of it with you. So thanks so much, Deb, for being a part of the podcast today. And everyone, you guys can pick up this album at ltsrecords.org, or you can go to listeningtosmile.com and find LTS Records on the menu there. So thank you guys for listening, and thank you, Deb, and goodbye, everyone.
Thank you, everyone. Thanks, Ian.